Hello. Y'all ready to get going? Okay, so I wanted to be John Dutton for Halloween, but they said I look more like Lloyd. I wasn't handsome enough to be John Dutton from Yellowstone, so I am Lloyd. Rip's in the back. I'm his sidekick, I guess. But we are not going to get in a fight later and beat the poo out of each other. So appreciate y'all that dressed up. Try to make it a little fun today. I'm Nick Newman. I'm executive director. I talked to you guys a little bit yesterday. So I'm going to go over commissioner roles. Now, I try to go broad brush because I know a lot of these are a little different. They're not all go by the same rules, but this is what we got. So this may not exactly apply to you, but all of you. But so my experience with boards, I worked for Memphis Light Gas and Water 36 years in the capacity of engineering, construction, operations, all that kind of stuff. I had a 5-member board and a 13-member city council. Anything over 25, now this was a $2 billion a year budget. Anything over 25,000 had to go to the board and to city council. So you want to talk about conflict? I've been around a lot of conflict with that. I was on the TAUD board from 2011, so taking this position in April. So I've got some experience working with boards. Boards I've actually been on. Now, I just want to let you know, a couple of these are I wasn't on for very long. 811 and T-Bor, I was on those for just a couple of months, and then I accepted this job, and they kicked me off of both of them. So I've got a little experience on those two boards, but water, wastewater financing board, I was on that one for a long time. And the Surf Club was probably the most abrasive board that I was ever on. It was a little community in Arkansas. What did I do? Okay. All right, so let's do an audience survey. Board members, and that could be municipal, all right. Utility leaders, how many utility leaders here? Okay. Or the TAUD board. TAUD board, anybody in here? All right. So I got to behave. I got my board in here. Who's just here early for lunch and didn't know we were doing this? I'm with you on that. I promise I'm not going to keep you too long. Okay, I'm gonna do this is my disclaimer. This is talking about utility boards. That's what this presentation is about. Don't take any of this personal. This is just what the book, I'm gonna show y'all a book in a minute, talked about. And this is just, it's going to be talking about boards. I'm gonna throw some funny stories in there about my time with board. I'm gonna try to make it a little bit fun right here before lunch. Okay, so this is the book where I got most of this from. It's called The Perfect Board. It's a really good, better not put that there, it'll be the way. It was a book that was given to me when I was on the 811 board by Bill Turner. If any of you know Bill Turner on the 811 board, he's executive director there, good guy. He said it was required reading. It's a really good book. My plan was to buy this book for all you folks so y'all could have it. Well, it's not in production anymore. You can go on Amazon, pick it up in an audio book for about, I think it's like $10. I would suggest you get it. It's a really good book. So what it said, organizations fail sometimes to realize their potential just because the individuals don't know. No one went to school for this. I mean, no one really knows, how to be a board member. I know when I was put on the TAUD board in 2011, Bob came up to me and goes, I need you to finish the term of a board member who had to step off. That was my training, and I was in there. So, this book does really good, and I'll talk about it in a minute, trying to give you some things about how to be a good board member. And it talks about, you got to be ready. And I almost mentioned that several times. And like I said, y'all have seen all this before. Just going to try to do a little different spin on it. So the Perfect Board Manual, it's a set of principles. It's all 1 page, 2-page little descriptions of all these definitions we're going to cover. And there's 50 of them. I figured 2 minutes per, we'll get out of here in about 100 minutes. I'm kidding, that's a joke. We're only going to cover some of them. These are the ones we aren't going to cover. I wasn't about to get into compensation, forbidden fruit, additional compensation, antitrust. I'll leave that for Don and those guys. So I'm just going to cover a few of these I thought were kind of neat ones. So these are the ones we are going to cover, and I may not get through all these. If I don't, it's no big deal. I covered the ones up front that I kind of like. And these are kind of more soft skills more than, board, like you heard from Don this morning, what the policies are, what boards do, all those kind of things. We have additional presentation that Don's done in the past of, all the nuts and bolts of how a board operates. These are more soft skills kind of things. So the first one is loyalty. So you got to put the interest of the utility or the people you're serving first. This is a tough one. This is a tough one to start on because most people who are board members are very ingrained in their community. They're either on a bank or do something like that. So they've got lots of friends. They've got lots of influential people who really expect stuff out of them to be a board member. So I've dealt with that as a board member. I know everybody has too. But it's most important that you look at, you got to put on the hat of the utility or whatever you're managing over your personal interest. So in this, somebody wants to do this, and if you don't, tell me the most embarrassing thing you've ever had at a board meeting and the most weirdest thing you've ever had at a board meeting. Anybody got something weird that's happened? Come on. All right, well, I'll tell you mine. I had a board member who, at my board, now this is a pretty big company, pulled out a water design that he got from a friend of his, a water main to a church. It's about a $150,000 water main extension. In the board meeting, he decides he wants to try to redesign this. In the board meeting. He's a lawyer. He don't know anything about water design, but he was a member of this church. Actually, he wasn't a member of his church. His mom was. So I'm trying to explain to this guy the nuts and bolts of how to design, I think it was a 16-inch water main, to a church, and he didn't know nothing about it. So to me, it was very frustrating I was a vice president of engineering at the time, and the board members trying to redesign this in the board meeting. The second one I dealt with a lot, we had electric in Memphis. So we had set ways how we restored power to people. And I would always have board members who say, well, this person of mine, a constituent of mine, is the last one to get service. Every time, the last one to get service. And I dealt with this just about every time we had major power outages. And we had about 500,000 electric customers. I've had 350,000 outages. So essentially everybody was out. Well, this customer is always out is on the very end of the line in a place called Shelby Forest, which has trees. It's called Shelby Forest. And you had to explain physics in a board meeting to a board member. It's really not their place. Obedience. This is pretty self-explanatory. You just need to know the bylaws. You need to know the rules. You need to know everything about being a board member. And that's on you to know that. Care. You must, attend the meetings, be informed. It's real frustrating, and this goes both ways. It's real frustrating for an organization to go into a board meeting and they ask question after question after question, and you've already answered those questions in the packet they've got. You've already sent in the packet they got. But on the flip side of that, it's very frustrating as a board member that the general manager or whoever's of that utility doesn't give you that information until right before the board meeting. Anybody experienced that? And there's no way you can review it. So that goes both ways. Obligation. So this is just talking about you got to make your judge it, ensure you're doing things right. This is all about the Benjamins, the dollars. It's the board's position. They need to make sure they're funding, they're doing rate increases, they're doing all the things to make that utility successful or whatever organization successful. So you need to make sure you're involved enough, you know enough about it, and you're informed enough to help that board make wise decisions to make sure the utility's got what it needs. Confidentiality. So I know most board meetings are public meetings, but some are not. Some are kind of private. There's a way to erode things in a board or with an executive director or whatever is if you talk about things you're not supposed to talk about. If you share things outside of meetings, they're supposed to be confidential. Man, you talk about causing some problems there. And all the issues should be kept in the boardroom. I know there's all kinds of rules about board members can't meet after board meetings and all that thing, but all those kind of things, which is good, but they still do it. Sometimes it happens and it's just really not a good thing. Competency. So this is one that I really like. I've been on some really successful boards and some really tough boards. Competency doesn't mean what you know about the utility service or what you know about water main breaks or electric or gas. It's about that. It's about you've got some competency or you've got something on that board that will help that utility, that will help that business, whether that's you're a finance person, you're an operations person, you're a leader in the community person, or you're work for a charity. All those things are really good to get on the board. but you only need one lawyer, by God. If you got more than one lawyer on your board, you're in trouble. So don't put two lawyers. Excuse me? Oh, that's the lawyer in the back. I had one that had two lawyers on it. It was unbelievable. All we did is listen to them argue. It was great. Respect. So this is just about being nice, treat people like you want to be treated kind of thing. I mean, so I'm going to tell you about a couple. Take notes, sidebar conversations. So any of y'all want to see the most dysfunctional, well, not the most, but one of the most dysfunctional leadership groups they are, look up City of Memphis City Council meeting and watch their live stream. There's a guy who's a city, now this ain't a board, but it's kind of the same thing. He walks around the entire city council meeting just shooting the stuff with people, just not paying attention. People up there doing presentations on multi-billion-dollar buildings and all this stuff, and he's just yakking. You'll see him. And then he ran for mayor and got beat badly. But anyway, and then when it's time to make the vote, he asked 25 questions that have already been answered the last 25 minutes. So, kind of about the rounds of respect. All right, as a general manager, what is the ugliest thing a board member has ever said to you? If they're in here, don't say it, but y'all aren't participating. All right, well, I'll tell you mine. You are environmental terrorists killing the inner city kids of Memphis. That's what I was told. Well, here's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, no, sir, I'm killing all of the kids because we provide fluoride to water of all of Shelby County. That's what I wanted to say. This is, of course, what I said. We have a referendum voted on by the citizens of Memphis, and if you want that changed, you got to go down the street and talk to city council. So that's as a general manager. So board members, y'all got anything ugly or interesting, someone that you've been dealing with that said to you, they don't know who I am, they know nothing about me, I can't believe they said this. Y'all not gonna play. That's okay. You got one? He wasn't a Christian because he was trying to do a rate increase. That's pretty rough. That one's got my beat. Anybody else got one? It's tough when it gets personal. That's the ones that I don't mind you can say about my work ethic. When they get personal like that, that's a rough one. So this was when I was on the Habitat for Humanity board. One of my favorite boards to be on ever. I loved it, got to love to go build the houses, loved to be involved in the financing. We did a finance class for the people who are getting the homes and make sure they can take care of what they got to do on the house. This was a contractor who was doing work for Habitat for Humanity. He charged 4 hours to replace an electrical outlet in one of the homes. 4 hours. So I'm asking him why he charged 4 hours. He goes, Mr. Newman, you obviously aren't familiar with electric standards and don't know what it takes to put in the work. I'm an electrical engineer. I do electrical wiring on the side. I've built 3 houses and I wired every one of them. He might have should have done some research about me before he said that. He didn't do any more work for Habitat for Humanity from their own. So that one wasn't really too ugly. I just thought it was interesting. Unity. You must act as one group. I think it's good board meetings. They can be constructive. They can be whatever discussion. Air it out in the board meeting. Don't air it out to everybody else after the board meeting. Get it all taken care of there, and each member of the board should be able to feel like they can speak. Sometimes you got one board member that's, an alpha male or alpha female who really just tries to run the board meeting. Some other people are kind of intimidated to say stuff. You need to have an open board member where people can do that kind of thing. Talk. Willingness to serve. I've talked about this a couple of times already. Must put in the time, must be preparation prior to meetings. So I want to talk about this just a little bit. So I was on a water wastewater financing board. We got these pretty good sized packets that you had to read. So I get it. It's a lot to read. It's a lot to keep up with. So when they did T-Bor, the packet went from this to about this. Now it's all digital and it's a lot to read. I mean, it was crazy. Anthony's in here. Bruce Giles is in here. Nate's in here. I mean, it is an unfathomable amount of work. Now they do really good. They give us little, short, little things to talk about, executive summaries, I guess, but I get it's hard to do that, but it is essential that you know what people are talking about in the meeting, especially on that kind of board where You got folks coming in who aren't always doing what they're supposed to do, and you're trying to help straighten them out. Open-minded. So this is pretty much talking about, you need to have open forum. I kind of talked about this a little bit already. You need to have open dialogue in the board meeting where everybody needs to realize they can talk, feels like they can say what goes on their mind. Paradox or leadership. All right. Who is the only employee of the board at most utilities? General manager. You're right. That's who it should be. So this paradox of leadership is pretty much talking about the conflict between boards and the leadership. And I know y'all have all seen that. I've been in those situations before. So it's talking about, and the way to get through this is know what the expectations are. The board should know what their expectations, what is expected of them, and so should management. You know, there's always some conflict there, and it kind of says, it talks about, you know, there's a conflict. Her board member wants to assert their authority and put a mark on the organization. I've had some board members like that. I'm going to make sure over my tenure, we're not going to raise rates. That's an awful thing to say, because you know, when you go raise rates, you know, you already lost one vote. You're not going to get that vote. You're not going to change your mind when they publicly say things like that. So, you know, if you're not understanding that, and you know, you got to make sure, you know, that conflict is minimized. It's going to be there to some point. And if you don't have any conflict, you know, maybe people are just kind of paper pushers. They're not pushing back on stuff. And you want people to do that, but you want to do it in a constructive way, in a way that helps the organization overall. Diversity. So essentially this is pretty much, and there's nothing in policy about what you want to do. A diverse board is a good board to me. I think you want opposing views, you want different views. I think if you've got a bunch of people on the board that are all like-minded, that's really not good, because there's some portion of that community or those customers that aren't being served. They're not being heard because you got a bunch of people that think the same way, and they're not going to listen to that. I think it's very important. Pretty much what I was told through my time is you want your board to reflect the people they are over. So you want the diversity on the board to kind of be what the makeup is of your community. That's what I've been told. And I think that's pretty successful. I'm super excited for the TAUD board, not TAUD. I'm sorry, that was from yesterday. TAUD board. We got 3 females on there, so I'm really excited about that. Had an election earlier this year. Had 2 boards positions open. 2 females were elected, and we got a 3rd female that's already on there. I'm really excited to have an opposing view. Not that the board's bad like it was, but it's good to have different views. Now they all run utilities, so in that fact, we're all going to think alike about those issues. But I just think diversity is very important. Meetings. Y'all not going to raise your hand, I know, but anybody got a board member who loves to get on a soapbox and just talk about nothing, and you're like, shut up. I get it. You don't like that. Just can we move on? Meeting used to drive me crazy. So meetings, I mean, be aware of the commitment time. Be aware if you're meeting. Now I get it. Board meetings, the T-board meetings go 5 hours. They didn't bring us lunch the first time, and me and Anthony, when I was on it, we was about to, we was like, who's going to go first? It was a long meeting, but that's just because of the material. That wasn't because anybody was grandstanding. Just make sure people's got time commitments. If you're, let's get the work done. Let's move through the board meetings. But if you got a bunch of side stuff you're dealing, and you're chasing rabbits, don't do that. I mean, you pretty much when you get people like that, they start talking, the whole room goes, and they don't listen to a word you're saying. They don't. Trust me. I've done it. Meeting attendance, this is pretty, if you've got someone who's not showing up for meetings, it questions do you want to serve? Are you involved? Are you really interested in being on this board? And I really believe that all organizations should have something in their bylaws that says if you missed it, X meetings, you can be voted to get you off the board. Now, people are sick, people got issues, I get that. But just not showing up because I can't do it or whatever, after a while gets kind of old. Public scrutiny. So T-Board is one. The business is good at T-Board. Boards are doing some things questionable around, and that's why those packets are so thick, because there's a lot of folks not doing what they're supposed to do. You need to make sure you're doing the right thing in the board. And then, from criminal activity to not going by the rules for procurement, for not doing all your, whatever policies you have. Any of that stuff is going to get you in trouble because there is a ton of people looking at it. I get calls maybe once every 2 weeks from somebody utility and going, my board's doing this or my general manager's doing this. What do you think about that? I send them to Don, but most of the time, send most people to Don. But I mean, just do the right thing. If you don't, somebody's looking at what you're doing, whether it's your customers or whoever. Someone's going to find out, and you're going down. Penny sent me 2 this week about a couple of utilities that got in trouble. So people are looking at what you're doing. Okay, so this is talking about documents. You can't do a Wolf of Wall Street if y'all seen that movie where you're burning stuff, shredding stuff, getting rid of stuff. You got to make sure that you're keeping proper documents and you're doing what you're supposed to do. Now, I don't know what the rules are. Don does, or Melanie or Carol in my office can definitely tell you that. If you've got documents, how long you can keep them. You need to make sure that they're accurate. You need to make sure, you're not altering them, destroying. And this was done in 2002, I believe. And there's also a whistleblowers provision in there for that as well. For people who aren't doing the right thing, somebody can blow the whistle on them. Lawyers. Who hissed? Somebody hissed, Don. I heard it. So you got to have a lawyer. You need a lawyer at your board meeting. You need a lawyer to review your minutes. You need to all this. You got to do all that. Don loves it. Don loves doing agendas and loves doing minutes. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to pick any no more. This is the last lawyer joke, Don. But you got to have them, man. You got to have them in board meetings because there's going to be some customer. There's going to be some that's going to come up and ask a question, or a board member, or about something. If you don't have the lawyer sitting there, it's sometimes it's really hard to say, we'll get back with you. And I get it. Lawyers are expensive. They are. If you don't have one on staff, bring one in. They're very cheap. But you really need them there. And they need to review all your documents. TAUD. Now, my wife didn't proofread this because she was keeping my grandbabies last night. So there's probably all kinds of misspelled on it. And I wasn't going to send it to Don because he would have rewrote the whole thing because he's really good at it. But I try to get him to review all the documents that Don can because it's just good to have a very experienced eye to look over it. And Don's the best I've ever seen. Worked with a lot of lawyers. Executive session. So close to the staff. Y'all have executive sessions. You got something to do with. I guess we all do, right? So one thing to think about executive sessions, and this is in smaller utilities, I think this probably hits more than big ones. We had executive sessions once a month at the utilities I was at. We're being sued or somebody did something or whatever. But in smaller utilities, just be cognizant of when you do that. People on the staff there, they're worried about what you're talking about because they're not included. So they're included in everything else. You can have an executive session with the board and the executive director or whatever, and or the general manager, and they're not included. There's always, so just be cognizant of that. You really can't talk about what you talked about in there, but just think about, you may have some of these pretty small shops, 6, 8 folks. You got 2 of them in the meeting. There's others that are not in the meeting. Are they talking about me? What did I do? Am I in trouble? Those kind of things. So the running joke in Memphis when I was there, we'd have executive sessions, and it was a big union shop. 3,000 employees. I had about 1,300 that I managed at one point in time. The joke was whenever our team came out of executive session, the union leadership knew about it right then. And amazing enough, that's sometimes true. I don't know how it happens. They'd be coming out with something discipline for somebody, or termination of a higher level person or something like that at the company, and the union's already on it, want to file grievances and all this. So you just got to make sure what you do in there, it stays confidential, and you only need to talk about what you're in there to talk about. If you talk about other things in there, other than what you're in there to talk about in executive session, you're breaking the sunshine law and all that good stuff. So we've had examples of that before where covered some things they really should have covered with the public. So this is kind of explains really, group of people get in a car, no air conditioning. They're driving to a city they don't like. They're driving to a restaurant they don't like. And they're buying some food they don't like. But they do it, and they all got better things to do, but they do it because they just want to get along with everybody else. It's talking about going to Abilene. There's a whole book about this. It's very interesting, very good book. So kind of same thing. sometimes you know, you can't see the trees for forest, forest for the trees, whatever that saying is. So I've got an example of this as well. In Memphis, a couple of years ago, probably 3 years ago now, we decided we were going to do a study to leave TVA. Big deal. We're TVA's biggest customer. We did an evaluation, looked over it, spent millions of dollars doing the evaluation, got our board involved to talk about it, and they just talked about everything, but the final decision is this the best decision for our customers? Oh yeah, we can split our energy up, we can buy from 3 or 4 people, we can buy on the spot market, and we do all this, but they lost sight of what is the best thing for our customer. And I mean, it went on a rabbit trail for about 6 or 8 months. Finally came back with a recommendation that was correct. They finally brought it back together and said, all right, what is most important? You know, we're going to say, all right, the original estimate was going to save about $450 to $500 million a year if we switched. The reality of it was only get about 45 million a year. We're going to save $45 million a year. Okay, so that's a lot of money. I get that, right? But we're going to spend about $8 billion to build the infrastructure to get to where we need to buy power from the other group. That's going to be paid for over the next 40 years. It wasn't a good decision. And I mean, it went around forever. And they finally got it back, made the right decision. But sometimes you can get other influences in there, and you're really not looking at the bottom line of why you're going on this trip and why you're doing what you're doing. Strategic planning. So I think there's some misconceptions about strategic planning. It doesn't have to be this big, thick manual, you know, X, Y, Z, we're going to do this. You just got to have a plan for the future. It can be pretty simple. There's all kinds of firms out there that can come and help you write a strategic plan. You can do one yourself. I mean, it can be as simple as this is what we want to be in 5 years. It can be that simple. Some people get kind of inundated. This strategic plan needs to be complex and all this. It doesn't have to be. It's just a simple plan. It gives you something you're looking to do. This is where we want to be. Doesn't have to have just tons of details of how you get there. It just lets the organization know this is where we're going and this is why we're going there. Technology. So technology, I got one on this one too. So technology should save a task, time, and money. Does everybody agree that always happens with technology? Anybody disagree with that statement or no, it doesn't always help? I got a good one on that. Technology should be more communication, better record keeping. Absolutely. You know, you can store things, you can get rid of paper documents. I'm all for that. That's what we should be. So we did a project in Memphis where we were changing out our whole ticket base, our pays, our rates, everything. Huge software package. And I'll tell you later what it is. I'm not going to say it up here. We spent about $100 million on this thing. It ended up making us, we had more paperwork afterwards. So we had systems that wouldn't talk to each other. So you had then have an interface that would talk between the two systems. And they're still operating this thing. And it was one of those ones, by God, we've spent all this money. We're going to shove it in there and we're going to use it. And it takes more work to get things through this system than if they would have just left the old system that we had. Anybody done that? Technology ain't helped a bit, just made it worse. That was a big example I got of that. And if you are recording this, do not send this to my old boss, Doug McGowan. He will kill me. And he went to Top Gun. I'm pretty sure he can kill me and not even know. Probably shoot me from here from some drone or something. But it does help. Now, one thing about technology you got to keep in mind, and I've dealt with this some with the TAUD board. You know, you've got folks who aren't tech savvy. You can't just, if you got a board member that's tech savvy, you've got someone that you're working with that's not tech savvy, you got to help them. You can't implement something they're going to struggle with. You got to try to help them through that. I got Brian back in the back. He's my tech guy, and he helps me, for one. Found out yesterday, I thought I was sending emails out to my board, and none of them got them. They got some of them. So we got some tech issues there at TAUD as well. So technology is a thing we got to do, but we got to be real careful what we do with it and make sure we're doing the right thing. So kind of as a wrap up, so the perfect board never be reached. I mean, I get it, but this book is really good. It's like I said, it kind of just kind of things, kind of soft skills things. You know, you're not going to get harmony. You're not. Besides, would it be fun? Would your day be fun if every board meeting was boring and no one had conflict and everybody was happy and kumbaya and those I don't know. I like a little conflict in my life. Maybe I'm a weird guy, but I mean, I don't think it's. But this book does really help with those in those relationships. Helps build those relationships on a board and the general managers. So boards are busy. I get it, but I think it's very important to take some time and just put something on the agenda like integrity. And I know we got ethics training we have to do. I'm pretty sure that's required for everybody and a couple other training things. But you know, if you have a board, we have a board advance, or if you have some type of board meeting that you have, do some soft skill stuff. It will really bring your board closer together than all day. All you're talking about is financing this, funding this water main extension, doing whatever. I just think it's good. Your board will be. We did these board retreats and senior executive staff retreats at Light, Gas, and Water. We'd go over in Arkansas and we'd climb trees and rappel off stuff and have meetings and talk about stuff. And it really brought our team closer together. And I know that's hard to do and probably can't even do it anymore, but just put some stuff on your agenda where you can talk about things. Hey, communication needs to be better. We need to be more transparent. How can we work better with our community? How can we work better with our customers? How can we be better partners or help our customers out to pay their bills or do whatever they got going on? I think those things are very important for a board to do. That's it. I told you we're going to keep you late for lunch. Any questions? Y'all are hungry, aren't you? Well, thank y'all for being here. I really appreciate it. Beth has got y'all a really good lunch, so y'all better drink some caffeine because you're going to be sleepy this afternoon because it's a meal. Thank y'all very much. Have a great day.